Hello, everyone. This is Chris Adams. Thank you so much for joining us for this session of on taxpayer receipt. We periodically do learning opportunities here at Balancing Act, and we're very excited to show you taxpayer receipt. Just recently, we've done a new software release that makes it very easy to do taxpayer receipt and to even do some customizations. What we've done is we've separated out the taxpayer receipt module from the simulation so that they no longer have to be the same. And that's exciting, and we're happy to be able to show you today. So the thing I'd like to do first is to simply show you some of the types of information that goes into a taxpayer receipt, and then we're going to actually take a look at one and create our own. So Balancing Act simulation and taxpayer receipt depend on having at least 4 types of information, 5 types for the simulation. But the first one is the category, and that's public safety in this instance. The second one is police. The third type of information, amount at the subcategory level. And then there's also more info at this blue info icon level, and that's what appears when somebody hits the blue info icon. So I'm going to go now to a live version of the software and give you a quick demo. So one of the more recent cities to go live with Balancing Act is Brighton, Colorado. It's not exactly a suburb, but it's not too far from Denver. It's northeast of town. And this is a picture of the city manager with a nice quote about why they believe in budget transparency and participation. And then this link takes you to a Balancing Act simulation. And this link takes you to their Balancing Act, or their taxpayer receipt. So I'm going to click on that just to give you a quick demo. And it says, want a receipt for your city of Brighton taxes? Answer a few questions to find out how much you paid. Colorado, I think, is fairly typical in that it relies, municipalities rely mostly on sales tax and property tax. And so these questions that Brighton uses are intended to make an estimate, a personalized estimate of how much sales tax and property tax that a resident pays to Brighton for Brighton to use for services to residents. And so it starts out by asking your annual income, and then it also asks your age. We worked with an economist to develop a technique that uses the Bureau of Labor Statistics consumer expenditure survey to say that somebody at a certain income, in this case, let's say $50,000 of income, and let's just say it's a 35-year-old person, that somebody with this amount of income has X amount of disposable income, and then a 35-year-old buys Y market basket of goods. And so, for example, a 35-year-old would probably buy more goods and services that are sales taxable than my 90-year-old father. So my 90-year-old father buys almost exclusively healthcare services at this point, whereas a 35-year-old would probably buy a whole lot more consumer products that would have a sales tax applied. And then this next question asks, what percentage of your shopping for goods and products do you do in Brighton? And so if you make a guesstimate of that, let's just say 80%. And this is because if you make your purchases for goods and products outside of Brighton, that sales tax isn't available to the city. So this is actually a very important one in terms of just sort of reinforcing to folks that that when you buy local, that you're helping your local community and your local city to pay for what it needs to have done. And then down here, it asks you own a home in Brighton. If you say yes, you're asked to enter your assessed value. And I haven't looked this up, but I think a typical assessed value for a home in Brighton would be about $18,000. And by the way, this info icon gives you a link to their website. This one goes to Adams County, and this one goes to Weld County, because Brighton is actually 2 counties. And once you've entered this information, you can say view your tax receipt, and then it comes up with a very clean looking screen that has information that you can then take a look at and see how much is going towards each item. And so in this case, mayor and city council is what they've chosen to put first. So you can click on the blue info icon, see what that looks like. And so the hypothetical person that we just came up with is paying $6.37 a year, or about 50 cents a month to support that. Same with legal, administration. I can click, I believe this is the city manager. Yes, it's city manager and executive administration team. So once again, not very much. And then you scroll down and you start to see where, there's a little bit more money that's going to things like facilities and general services. Public safety is almost always the largest. Streets and fleet, that's usually a large one. Parks and Rec is often a very large one. And then you can see just the other things as well. And then if you click on this, you get a breakdown of, this is the total amount of sales and property tax that's paid to the city by the hypothetical person that we created. If you click on this, you can see that most of that was sales tax, and about a fourth of it was property tax. Now, most of the time, our cities and counties do both taxpayer receipt and the simulation. And so in this case, down here, it says, are these the right priorities? And then it says, try an interactive simulation to make your own budget and share it with public officials. So if you click on that, it then takes you to Balancing Act taxpayer receipt. And this is the subject of a different webinar, so I'm not going to bother with that right now. So let's go to my Sandbox account and just get a sense of what it looks like to create a taxpayer receipt. So I'm going to go ahead and so that when you log into to Balancing Act, you typically start at the dashboard. And like I said, this is just a Sandbox account for me. So it gives you some basic information about how many people have used your site, average time on the site, taxpayer receipt visits, and simulation submissions, and then it just gives you a bunch of stuff. But like I said, this is just my sample account, so it's not populated. Typically, well, there's really nothing is too typical, but we look for about a 0.5% or 1% of the population of a public entity to do page views, and we've had some that have exceeded that, and some that are a little bit shy of that, but that's actually a pretty good number. So for a city the size of, say, 20,000 or so, if you had 200 or 300 people spending usually 10 to 12 minutes on your site, that's actually a pretty good one. So anyway, so you got simulations. This is how you control simulations here. This is our meeting mode, which is the adaptation to our simulation that makes it usable in face-to-face settings. And today we're going to focus on taxpayer receipt. And so these are just some samples I've created over here. Let's go ahead and create a taxpayer receipt. And I'm going to, there's a variety of ways of doing it. I'm going to show you the easiest one first, and then I'll sort of backfill with some ways to create some different ways of creating taxpayer receipts. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to call this sample on tax day. And then we go here and we select the language that we want, English or Spanish we have by default. We can also do French, and we can do Vietnamese very soon. And then this gives you an option of starting from scratch, of duplicating the budget from a simulation, or you can duplicate a taxpayer receipt. Now, this is one of the new innovations. It used to be that we would just duplicate the simulation, and so we'd have an entity that would create a simulation, and then we'd run taxpayer receipt off of that. We can still do that, and that's actually a really good way to do it, because if you're using Balancing Act simulation, you just click this, and then you choose the budget that you want to be your base for your taxpayer receipt, and then you build your revenue around that. That's actually a terrific way to do it, and that's the one we're going to do in just a moment. But there's other ways that we have now as well. So you can duplicate a current tax receipt. Say that you want to update it from year to year. Maybe you might want to have a slightly different set of expenditures from the general fund. It just gives you all sorts of flexibility. And then you can also start from scratch, and this gives you the option of either building the expenditure items yourself, or you can import it using a CSV. So just for the sake of expedience, I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate from a simulation, and then down here it asks me which one do I want to duplicate from. and I'm going to just say quick start demo. This is one I created not too long ago. It doesn't have that many categories on it, but for our purposes, it'll be just fine. And then I'm going to say continue. And then it opens up a page where we can begin to put in our expenditures. So it already put in spending over here. So it's got just two categories. It's got police and parks and recreation with these subcategories. And then over here, it's got the opportunity to change the explanatory context if you wish. I'm not going to bother with that right now. And then also, if you want to change the amount over here, you can as well too. But the really nice innovation that we've just recently made possible is being able to estimate revenue yourself without having to get our developers involved. It's a really terrific time saver, and it gives you complete control over your simulation. So by default, or at least not so much by default, but at least in terms of being able to use the software, we can estimate three types of taxes: property tax, and typically it's real estate, but we've got some entities that do a motor vehicle tax that's taxed very similarly to property tax. We can do income tax. It seems like it's typically cities in the east that have a municipal income tax, and we can handle that here. And then sales tax. And sales tax is, in some ways, it's the most complicated on our side. It's not too complicated on your side. So let's go ahead and just choose the two most typical. Let's choose property tax and sales tax. All right, so if you click on property tax, it says that you want to include that. It's very easy. It shows you where these fields are mapped over here. And so the first thing it asks is, what is the assessed value of your primary residence? So this is where it's going to show up on Balancing Act taxpayer receipt. And so it's asking the value of your primary residence. We went ahead and pre-populated this with assessed value, but we've also had entities use actual value and market value. Assessed seems to be the most popular because it's something, it can be a known quantity that you can look up. And so I'm going to go ahead and just leave it as assessed, but if you wanted to use a different type of valuation, you can. And then you just need to be certain to adjust it when you set the rate down below. So we'll leave this alone, but if I wanted to change it, it'd be easy to do. I'd just go ahead and change this to market or whatever. But I'm going to go ahead and put assessed back in. And then you click out of it and it saves. And then the next one, I know that this might take you a little bit longer to do because you want to be precise about it, is to set the multiplier. So if you're using assessed value, you simply put in your millage expressed as a decimal. And so there's an example down here, like if you have a mill levy of 80.7860, in that case you would enter this amount, which is just expressing it as a decimal, and you just plop it right in there. And then what it'll do is it'll take this value, the assessed value of the primary residence, multiply it times the mill value to get the amount of property tax paid. Now, if you were going to use market value or actual value, you would need to you need to multiply two numbers together to get your multiplier. You need to take the product of your assessment rate and the mill levy. So the assessment rate would be the amount that you would multiply the actual value or the market value in order to get and times the mill levy in order to get a proper estimate of how much sales tax somebody's paying. So like I said, if you're using assessed value, it's easy. If you're using the other two, you need to come up with a multiplier that's usually the product of the assessment rate by the mill levy. Okay, and then this is using this information here, and then you need to set the context helper. So you've got assessed value of your primary residence, and then you've got this blue icon over here, and you need to fill this in with content. And so most of the time it can be pretty simple. It can be click here to find the assessed value of your property by searching your address. And so all you do is you click on this and you say, I want to edit that. And then you put in the correct address. So I'm going to go ahead and let me just see if I can find Adams County real quick. Adams County real property records. And so it looks like it's right here. And so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to get this as close as we can. There we are. And so I'm going to go ahead and copy that and then come back over here. And then I'm going to paste that right in there. Let me just make sure I got that. Let's see. Okay. There we are. I think I got it pasted in there correctly. But if you're not using assessed value and you want to use actual value, that would typically also be found on the website. And then if you want to use market value, if you like, you can send people to Zillow so that they can get a Zestimate real quick. Okay, so now our property tax should be pretty much set up. And now let's take a look at sales tax. And so sales tax, it's complicated on the back end. Oh, and by the way, if anybody has any questions or comments, please go ahead and just go ahead and raise your hand. I'm delighted to take any. The next one is sales tax. And so if you, hang on, I've got a little bit of ruffling around, so I'm going to mute somebody. So sales tax, you go ahead and just put in the rate. Now, the important thing here is that you're not collecting and using sales tax for every entity that levies the sales tax. So in many cases, the state would also have a sales tax. And so sometimes people think, well, the rate that people pay at the cash register is 7 or 8%, and so that's what I should put here. What we'd encourage you to do is to only be accountable for the revenue that comes to you, to your local government, to be used for purposes of your local government. And so let's just say that might be 2.5%. That's not a too far outside the ballpark example. And then you get the option over here to apply the percentage spent to calculation. So most of our newer clients are applying this. So this is when you ask users what percentage of goods and services they purchase within your jurisdiction. So it's this question right here. We think it's a good question to ask, but we've had 2 or 3 that have felt like that might be confusing, or they had some idiosyncratic circumstances where they didn't want to use that, and so you just click right here to turn that off. I'm going to leave it on for right now. And then we've gotten our revenue set up. We can take a look at spending and just sort of check that out real quick. We've already kind of looked at it, and I think it looks fine. These are just the amounts that would go on your budget. You can change those if you wish. And then you've got some settings that you can take a look at. You've got another opportunity to choose your language here if you wish. You can change that introductory text. So the default is answer a few questions to find out how much you paid. If some people like to throw the word estimate in or something like that. So if you want to customize that, you can. This is the call to action label. So call to action is what web people call the kind of the button at the bottom. And so currently the default is view your tax receipt. Once again, we've had some people that have thought it was really important to have the word estimate in there. So it's view your estimated tax receipt. You can put whatever you want there. And then the about text. That's actually quite important because this is where you're describing what it is, the revenue that you're collecting, and maybe your background. You might want to say here that you're doing an estimate. So I just went ahead and got some sample text that we can throw in here. This is adapted from San Carlos, California, and we can just throw it right in, and we can say, let's call it any town that are available. Okay, there we go. And then once again, you can change this call to action button. So if you're not using Balancing Act receipt, if you are using Balancing Act tax receipt, this is a great place to send people to take a look at your budget and use the simulation as well. If not, you can send people to your finance department's website. You can kind of send them wherever you want, and then here you just throw in the URL so that it'll all be there. So let's see. Maybe just for the heck of it here, we're going to say visit Brighton's simulation, and then we can go ahead and put Brighton's URL in, or oh, let's go ahead and put Brighton's simulation in here. I'm going to copy that. So I'm copying link address, and then we'll plop it in here. Okay, there we are. Okay, and then once again, just scrolling down at these options. If you don't have a simulation, you can customize this. You can just put whatever you want here. You can, once again, instead of saying try an interactive simulation, you can send people to your finance department website, really whatever you want to do with that, and then just put in the URL here. Oh, and then this last option is to show a breakdown of the tax calculation. So this is when you see the total tax calculation down here, this gives you an opportunity to just sort of see how that's broken down and change it if you wish. All right, so creating this in real time, let's take a look and see what we've got. Once again, there aren't that many categories here. So it says, so you've got the Anytown logo up here. We've got our about text here. So this is talks about we're only using sales and property taxes paid by Anytown residents. And then we said, let's go to Brighton's here, which we don't need to do because we already took a look at them. I'm going to say, okay, I got it. And then it's going to say, what's your annual income? And then it just says, this is your gross annual income, which is what our back-end calculation uses. And so it says, what is your annual income? So we're going to go, let's just say 50,000 bucks. And then we're going to say, what's your age? We'll go a little bit older this time. We'll go to 40. And then let's assume that, I don't know, 70% of shopping is done locally. And then we're going to say, and do you own a home? And say, what is the assessed value of your primary residence? And then I'm going to say, boy, I don't know what that is. And so I'd like to go take a look over here at Adams County, and let's just say that I looked it up by street number, blah, blah, blah. You all know how to do that. And then I found out that the assessed value of my primary residence was $25,000. And if I own an additional home, I can just add another. And then I'm just going to say, let's view the tax receipt. Okay, so now we find out that in this fictitious, because we don't have these numbers are inflated because I only brought in 2 categories, but in this instance, the police department, based on its share of the general fund, is spending $1,000, and Parks and Rec is spending $1,200, and then it's broken down. But you can see the samples here, the info icons come through, and then down here you see the breakdown between sales tax and property tax. And then over here, it gives you the opportunity to take a look at the Anytown simulation, which I think it pre-populated with, yes, it did, because I started from a simulation. Okay, so that's how you set up your taxpayer receipt. I can also show you just briefly, if you are interested in importing your information. I've already spoken a little bit about this graphic where it shares the types of information that you'll need. You only need 4 types of information. You need 5 are required. This is a description of what that taxonomy looks like. I can make this available to people after the fact. And then this is what the file looks like when it's ready to import. So it just needs to have the category, subcategory, amount, and more info. More details is only if you're doing the simulation, and just get it into this format. And then it's really easy to bring in. And if you have any questions, contact me. But let me just also show you. Let me do a quick demo of what it looks like to do an import. It's a really easy thing to do. So I'm going to go back to taxpayer receipt. And I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to say create with CSV, and then I'm going to say English. I'm going to say start from scratch, and then I'm going to say continue. And is it all there? Oh, okay, sorry. So then you set up the revenue just as you would otherwise. And then when you get to spending, you say I either want to add a category, which I can show you in just a sec, or you can import from CSV. So I'm going to go ahead and import from CSV. And this is a file I just created really quickly. And you can see that you've got cultural, and you've got support services, economic development and planning. You can move things around really easy, like say that you want to have Let's just say you wanted to have police up top. You just pull this up like this. There we are. Now police is on top. Say that you wanted to put safety programs right after patrol. You can plop that there, and it just all sort of it moves and just takes things with you. And then it's got the amounts that it pre-populates. And then if we were going to build this whole thing out, we'd go over to revenue and put in whatever revenue is relevant, and then we could do a preview. But I'm not going to do that since I've already walked you all through that. So that's how you create a taxpayer receipt using the Balancing Act suite of software. It's not. I'm not going to say it's super duper easy, but for most of our budget and finance folks, this is information that they're quite conversant with and should be able to develop it without too much trouble. Once again, if you have any questions, we love to talk about our products and about how we can help and support people. So please don't hesitate to give a call. You can reach me at the number on the screen here, or you can just shoot an email to info@balancingact.com. So if you have any questions, raise your hand, and if not, I'm going to go ahead and cut everybody loose on April 17th, which is tax day for 2018. All right, everyone, thanks so much. Please be in touch if you have any questions. Bye.